Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. And we're going to move to Myanmar for a bit. In a closed-door trial in Naypyidaw, the capital, Aung San Suu Kyi, the civilian leader, or the former civilian leader of Myanmar, has been convicted, for lack of a better term. She's been included in first series of charges, these including public unrest, and they basically sentenced her to 4 years in prison. We've been covering this story, so we wanted to cover the conviction. To join us, we have Carl Jha. Carl Jha is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. Carl, thank you for joining us on short notice. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. So Aung San Suu Kyi is convicted and is getting 4 years in prison. And that's, I would imagine, just the beginning. One of the other charges had something to do about COVID. At one point, it seems like they were looking for any and everything to basically hit her with to give this kind of a patina, a legitimacy after the military coup. What are your thoughts on all of this? And the charges in general, I mean, is your assessment basically the same as mine where, look, they were just trying to find some way to put her on ice in order to convict her, to get her out of the way as a civilian leader after the coup government takes over? What are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, like the charge on disrupting a public order during pandemic. I mean, these pretty ridiculous, as you said. But this is pretty much predictable from the time when the coup actually happened. Now the military just want to make sure to put her behind bars for good. They don't need her anymore. Before they needed her because they reached a deal with the United States in order for the lifting of sanction against Myanmar. But now, you know, as we have talked about before, Aung San Suu Kyi's power grew to a point it threatened the junta. So they decided she has to go. But you know what? I think the military junta probably couldn't have chosen a better time to do the coup because of the pandemic. I mean, what could U.S. possibly do? Put more sanctions on Myanmar? Most of the Southeast Asia is under lockdown right now. I mean, nobody is going in or out of the country. You know, what is economic sanctions going to do right now? And I mean, like, I think this is all pretty predictable what they want to do. They just decided this is, you know, they have no use for her anymore. They're just going to put her away for good.
Well, so another side of this, is this the end of Aung San Suu Kyi? And I don't mean the grisly end, but the political end. In other words, are we going to see her come back out, try to reassert herself? I don't know what that would involve, but what do you think? Another way of looking at this is she didn't need the military anymore, I guess. That was, you know, you said that she got so powerful and that she had been making, they'd been calling for a meeting with her repeatedly sending letters to her administration, trying to bring her to the table. I'm not defending them or playing an apologist. I'm just saying they were trying to talk with her basically. And she wasn't wanting to have that conversation. As she tried to move past a strongly military-led government, they responded by saying, well, we don't need you. And that's actually the way the power flows. Anyway, do you think Aung San Suu Kyi is going to come back as a political leader? She was in political exile. She was a political prisoner for decades under military rule. Is this just going to be a resumption of that? And what do you think is going to be on the other side of this for her, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, never say never, right? I mean, but Aung San Suu Kyi is not a spring chicken anymore, you know, but compared to the time when she was first put under house arrest.
She was like in her 20s, right?
She was in either her late 20s or early 30s. I mean, now it's been more than 40 years have passed. I mean, how the military is piling all kind of charge on her. They try to put her away for life, basically.
But they've just added a new corruption
what's going to happen to her? What's going to happen to her political future is really going to depend on how, say, the Western powers will in its next move. Because Aung San Suu Kyi is a West's woman in Myanmar. They put her in power after 2012, basically. And to keep in mind, like the Aung San Suu Kyi story is also a cautionary tale for the U.S. foreign policy, because when they first, negotiated, broker a basically agreement with the junta to allow Aung San Suu Kyi to be spring out of jail and do a power sharing agreement, when all that was going on, when Hillary Clinton visited Yangon to visit Aung San Suu Kyi, that's when the Rohingya crisis already started. But U.S. made no mention about the Rohingya for all those years because they thought Aung San Suu Kyi, coming to power, she's going to be the pliable Western proxy in Myanmar to put a stop to the integration of Myanmar into China's orbit. But next thing Aung San Suu Kyi went to China, met with Xi Jinping, and that's when we start to hear about how Aung San Suu Kyi is not speaking up for the Rohingya refugees, and how Aung San Suu Kyi's Nobel Peace Prize should be stripped from her. And now that made the military junta saw opportunity. They saw, okay, now Aung San Suu Kyi's name is basically being tainted in the West. Her main backer. What else does she has? Nothing.
That's interesting.
They saw no.
So you don't think they would have did this if it wasn't for the Rohingya massacre and basically the political hit she took for it in the West?
But it also sounded like, Carl, you were saying that was the United States pivoting on that was a response to Aung San Suu Kyi going to meet with Xi Jinping. In other words, once that she showed that she was trying to remain at least an independent figure, if not leading towards their side, we said, okay, we'll hit you on this, right?
Exactly. I mean, the United States don't really care about Rohingya, human rights. Like I said, the Rohingya crisis started in 2012, right when Aung San Suu Kyi was coming back into the political scene, brokered by the U.S. agreement with the junta. And Rohingya crisis only deepened throughout the time that Aung San Suu Kyi her party was in power, and Aung San Suu Kyi was quite, she basically made excuse for the Myanmar military and all the crackdown on the Rohingyas, because she also rightly understand that her support from the Myanmar majority in Myanmar, the Myanmar majority have, they just don't care for the Rohingya. So she will not only not speak up for the Rohingya people, she is firmly on the side of the majority in their treatment of the Rohingya. So, but that wasn't an issue for U.S. while they thought they could use her and her government to steer Myanmar away from China. But once that Aung San Suu Kyi, keeps going to Beijing and signing up for the China's Belt and Road Initiative, U.S. thought, okay, now we're going to hit her with the Rohingya human rights thing, and the military just saw a opportunity. I mean, they're very opportunistic people, and they just decide this is time to remove her since her name is already tainted.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That's fascinating. What do you think is going to take place going forward on this particular case? And for that matter, if she's going to be in prison, the military junta, they basically consolidated power at this point.
Yes. I mean, right now, Myanmar, despite all these stories about the crackdown that's coming out of Myanmar, you may see from the oppositions, inside Myanmar, it's returning into some kind of new normal. Remember, this is also, the pandemic time. There's actually a YouTube channel called Eat, Sleep, Yangon. I think it's started by a Western expat. I think it's an Aussie expat. It's basically like a thirst. I call it the thirst trap street food tour of Yangon. She hires a bunch of attractive local women to take you on food tours throughout Yangon. But the good thing is it's constantly updated, and you can see through these videos that at least on the street level, the life is kind of returning into a kind of settling into a new normal in Yangon. People are going about their lives. It's not like, massive protests everywhere all the time. People are moving on largely. And I think that's what the military junta is counting on. Yeah. They're counting on just kind of shove Aung San Suu Kyi in the background, put her in jail and then pretend, nothing else happened. And at this point, U.S. is also busy. I mean, U.S. don't have too much option at this point. Like I said, it's pandemic. Any more sanction on Myanmar is basically not going to be that effective. And you really be interesting to see how the rest of the countries in ASEAN respond to the coming back of the military junta. But so far, what we have seen is that looks like everybody just want to return to business as usual. But whether that's going to happen, that's another question. But we will have to see.
It sounds like neither of the major parties that would, clearly China with the Belt and Road Initiative and is obviously the major regional power, has not a say, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but is going to want to have a say in the region. The United States, as the main geopolitical policeman or whatever, even, fading as that is, they're the other country that I would expect to want to get involved as a major power. Theoretically, India, but it's just really just the United States and China. And the United States doesn't have much to gain from protecting Aung San Suu Kyi because she had, after all, tried to play independent and, had been working with the Chinese. And from what I've heard, I don't see what they would gain by, the military has already won. I don't know what they would gain by trying to get involved and reinstate her, having done what she's done. And for the Chinese, from what conversations we've had with you and also another guest of ours on this one, KJ No, they're more pragmatic in the sense of being willing to do business with Aung San Suu Kyi or the new military coup or whomever, whichever administration is in power, just because, it's not their say. I don't want to characterize their relationship, but basically they don't care particularly, right, Carl?
Right. But I think U.S. is playing a spoiler role right now. I mean, if you look at what China is doing in the region, China has been proactive. China just completed the new China-Laos high-speed railway connecting China regional capital Kunming to the Laotian capital Vientiane. And there was also another plan to connect China with Myanmar with high-speed railway. That was put on hold that was actually put on hold in 2014 before Aung San Suu Kyi came fully into power by the previous junta government. And under Aung San Suu Kyi, there was actually after Myanmar signed up with the Belt and Road Initiative with China, that railroad project was about to take off before the coup happened. So what U.S. could potentially do is, piling up a whole bunch of economic sanctions, making doing business with Myanmar increasingly difficult, even for Chinese firms. So basically, U.S. is not playing a constructive role, but U.S. can make life difficult for Myanmar, for the business environment in Myanmar, for China to do more business in Myanmar. So in that way, it makes sense for China to for U.S. to apply diplomatic pressure, through its media to paint, to use a human rights issue as a club to beat the Myanmar junta government with, and while keep Myanmar economically and politically isolated.
Carl, I want to thank you for joining us, man. This is a fascinating issue. And like I said, we've been covering the story and you've been doing a great job giving us a rundown on what's taking place, why it's taking place. You guys, the voice that you guys were listening to is Carl Jha. He's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Silk In, and subscribe and support his podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. You guys are listening to Fault Lines. Thomas and Stranahan will be back taking your calls in the wrap. That's 202-521-1320. Back shortly.